Most people think working overnight security is one of the easiest jobs you can have. Most nights, they're right. But all it takes is one shift where something doesn't add up for that job to feel completely different. This happened during my 3rd month working security at a distribution warehouse just outside Columbus, Ohio. It was a massive place. 200,000 square feet of shelving, forklifts parked in rows, and enough dark corners to swallow a person whole. I worked the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift, alone, with nothing but a flashlight, a radio that barely worked past the loading dock, and a set of keys that opened every door in the building. I want to be clear. I wasn't scared of the dark. I'd done this job for 2 years at a different site before transferring here, and nothing ever happened. Nothing ever happens on night shift. That's the joke security guards tell each other. You sit, you walk your rounds, you drink coffee, and you go home. That's the job. Until the night in February, when the delivery log didn't match. Every night I checked the loading dock against the manifest sheet the day shift left behind. Trucks in, trucks out, pallet counts, seal numbers. It was tedious, but I liked it. It gave the night structure. That night there was a truck listed as departed at 9 p.m., but when I walked the dock at midnight doing my normal round, that same trailer was still sitting there, backed up to Bay 14. Doors shut, seal intact, according to the paperwork, except the seal number on the door didn't match the one written down. I stood there for a long moment just looking at it. You have to understand, in a warehouse this size, paperwork errors happen. Someone writes the wrong number, someone forgets to log a departure. I'd seen it before, but something about standing in that loading dock, at midnight, made my stomach tighten in a way paperwork errors never had. I radioed it in. No answer. I tried again. Nothing. The overnight dispatcher usually picked up within 30 seconds. This time there was just static and then silence. I told myself the radio was probably just dead in that section of the building. It happened sometimes, especially near the metal shelving units that blocked signal. I decided to check the trailer myself before writing it up. Standard procedure. Nothing dangerous about opening a truck door. I climbed the dock, unhooked the latch, and pulled the door up. It was empty. Not empty like nothing was ever in it. Empty like it had been cleared out fast. There were drag marks on the floor of the trailer, scuff marks like something heavy had been pulled toward the back doors instead of unloaded properly through the dock. And sitting in the corner, half hidden by a folded moving blanket, was a phone, screen cracked, battery dead. I didn't touch it. I climbed down, pulled the dock door shut, and started walking back toward the office to call my supervisor directly on the landline. That's when I heard the engine. Not from outside, from inside the warehouse. One of our forklifts, the electric ones we used for pallet stacking, doesn't have a combustion engine, doesn't make that kind of sound. But this was a low rumble, coming from somewhere in aisle 9, near the back wall where we stored overflow inventory that hadn't sold in months. Nobody should have been running any vehicle back there. I was the only person scheduled in the building. I want to tell you I did the smart thing. I want to tell you I went straight to the office and called the police. But at the time, my first thought wasn't fear, it was confusion. I thought maybe maintenance had scheduled overnight work I hadn't been told about. That happened sometimes too, so I walked toward the sound. The warehouse aisles at night are strange. The motion sensor lights only activate a few feet ahead of you, so you're always walking into darkness and watching the light click on behind you as you pass. By the time I reached aisle 9, the engine sound had stopped. Completely. Just silence and the hum of the HVAC system somewhere above. Then I saw the box truck. Parked at the far end of the aisle, engine off, headlights dark, was a plain white box truck that did not belong to our company. No logo, no plates that I could see from where I stood. Just parked there, inside a secured warehouse, past a gate that required a badge, past cameras that should have caught it entering. I did not go closer. I turned around and walked, not ran, walked back toward the office, because I did not want whoever was near that truck to hear panic in my footsteps. I made it to the office, locked the door behind me, and called 911 on the landline, keeping my voice as steady as I could while I told them a truck that shouldn't be there was inside a secured facility, and that our two-way radios had gone dark for reasons I couldn't explain. The dispatcher stayed on the line with me. She told me to stay in the locked office and not to go back out for any reason. I remember sitting on the floor beneath the desk, watching the door, listening for anything. No engine, no footsteps I could identify, just my own breathing and the sound of my heartbeat in my ears. Police arrived 11 minutes later. What they found was this. Someone had used a cloned access badge to enter through the rear gate earlier that night, before my shift even started, and had been sitting inside that trailer at Bay 14 for hours, waiting for a low-traffic window to move product out through a blind spot in our camera coverage. A spot maintenance still hadn't fixed from a system upgrade weeks earlier. When my rounds threw off their timing, they abandoned the operation mid-transfer, left the second truck running just long enough to reposition it, and got out through a service exit before officers arrived. The dropped phone had wiped data on it. No prints worth using. Whoever they were, they knew that building's blind spots better than I did, and I'd worked there 3 months. I quit 2 weeks later. Not because I was scared, not exactly. It was more that I couldn't stop thinking about how long they'd been in that trailer, close enough to hear my footsteps on my very first round, and how a badge that looked exactly like mine had gotten them through a gate meant to keep people like them out. Sometimes the scariest thing isn't what's hiding in the dark. It's realizing the system meant to protect you already had a hole in it, and somebody found it before you did. Most overnight security jobs are painfully boring. You check the gates, walk the property, fill out a few reports, and wait for sunrise. That's exactly what I expected the night everything went wrong. I was 26, working overnight security at a self-storage facility off the interstate. One of those places with 100 metal units lined up in rows, a gravel lot, and a single office with a space heater that never really worked. The pay was decent. The job was supposed to be boring. Check the gate, check the cameras, log anyone who comes in after hours. That's it. It was a Tuesday in October, cold enough that I could see my breath when I walked the lot. Around 11:40 p.m., headlights pulled up to the gate. A white pickup truck. The guy rolled down his window and told me he needed to grab something from his unit, said he'd forgotten some paperwork for a job the next morning. I asked for his gate code and his name to match the account. He gave me both. Everything checked out. Unit 114. I logged him in, told him he had until midnight since that's when the lot technically closed to new entries, and went back to the office. That should have been it. Normal interaction. Except 40 minutes later he was still there. I watched him on the camera feed, standing outside Unit 114. Not going in, not coming out, just standing there with the door half raised, like he was waiting for something. I figured maybe he was on the phone or sorting things out. But then he walked to his truck, sat in it for a few minutes, and came back to the unit again. He did this 3 times. Stand by the unit, sit in the truck, come back. At around 1 a.m., I decided to walk out and check on him. Mostly because leaving a unit half open overnight is a liability issue, and I didn't want to get written up. When I got close, he seemed startled, like he didn't expect anyone to actually walk over. He told me he was having trouble finding the paperwork and that he'd be done soon. Fine, not a big deal. I told him to let me know when he locked up, and I went back inside. Here's where it gets strange. I pulled up his account information again, just out of habit, to make sure everything matched. The name on Unit 114 didn't match the name he'd given me at the gate. Close, but not the same. I told myself maybe it was a family member's unit or a business partner, something like that. People share storage units all the time. I wasn't about to walk out and interrogate a guy over a paperwork discrepancy at 1 in the morning. But then, at 1:20, the gate camera picked up a second car. Another vehicle, this one idling just outside the property, lights off, parked on the shoulder of the road that ran along the fence line. Not pulling in, not leaving, just sitting there. I want to be honest with you, that's the moment my stomach dropped. Not because a car parked on a public road is illegal. It's not. People park on shoulders all the time. But something about the timing, the way it lined up right after this guy had been pacing back and forth by his unit for almost an hour, made the whole thing feel wrong in a way I couldn't explain with logic. I called my supervisor. It went to voicemail. I called the non-emergency police line next, because I wasn't sure if anything illegal was actually happening. I didn't want to send police after a guy for being weird at his own storage unit. The dispatcher took my information and said they'd send someone by when they had availability, which on a slow Tuesday night could mean 5 minutes or could mean 45. I stayed in the office, watching the monitor. At 1:35, the man went back into his unit, this time with the door most of the way down, low enough that I couldn't see his legs on camera. 10 minutes passed, then 15. The parked car on the road still hadn't moved. At 1:50, the unit door rolled all the way up, and he came out carrying something heavy, wrapped in a moving blanket, roughly the size of a duffel bag but rigid, like it had a frame to it. He loaded it into the bed of his truck, covered it with a tarp, and that's when the second car finally pulled forward, not into the lot, but along the fence, slow, tracking the movement inside like it was watching the transfer happen. I locked the office door. I know that sounds like a small thing, but in that moment it felt like the only thing I could control. The man drove up to the gate a few minutes later, told me he was all done, thanked me, and left. The second car pulled away almost immediately after him, in the same direction. 2 vehicles, same road, same time, like it had been planned that way from the start. The police showed up almost 20 minutes after that. I gave them the plate numbers from both vehicles, walked them through the timeline, showed them the footage. They thanked me, said they'd look into it, and that was the last I heard that night. 3 days later, my supervisor called me into the office. He didn't tell me much, just that the unit had been rented under a name that didn't match any ID on file, that the account had been paid in cash for 8 months straight, and that detectives had come by to pull our footage as part of an ongoing case. He couldn't say more than that. Company policy, or maybe police instructions, I never found out which. I put in for a transfer to day shift 2 weeks later. I told my manager it was for personal reasons, which was true, just not the whole truth. The truth was that I couldn't stop replaying that hour and a half in my head, the pacing, the mismatched name, the second car parked in the dark like it was waiting for a signal. To this day, I don't know what was in that unit, or what was inside the thing he carried out wrapped in a blanket. I don't know who was in that second car, or why it left the second he did. All I know is that some questions are better left alone, because some answers, once you have them, you can never put back down. And every time I drive past a storage facility at night now, I think about how many quiet units are sitting there in the dark, holding onto secrets nobody's ever going to ask about. Most overnight security jobs are quiet. You walk the halls, check the doors, fill out a few reports, and wait for morning. That's exactly what I expected from this job, until one night, a single open door changed everything. It was an old office complex on the edge of town, the kind of place that used to be busy back in the 90s and now sat half empty, waiting for some company to lease out the remaining floors. I got hired to watch it overnight, 12-hour shifts alone, from 7 at night to 7 in the morning. The pay was almost double what I was making at my last job, and at the time, that was all I cared about. The place had 4 floors, offices, break rooms, a parking garage underneath, and a basement level that was mostly storage and old electrical rooms. My job was simple. Walk the halls every 2 hours, check the doors, make sure nothing was out of place, sign the log, and go back to the front desk. The first 2 weeks were boring. Genuinely boring. I'd bring a book, watch videos on my phone, eat my dinner at the desk. Nothing ever happened. I started to relax into it. I even started looking forward to the quiet. Then came a Thursday night in October. I remember the date because it was the night before my sister's birthday, and I kept thinking about what to get her while I did my rounds. I was on the second floor, checking office doors, when I noticed one of them was open. Not wide open, just cracked maybe 2 inches. That door was always locked. I'd checked it myself the night before. I stood there for a second, telling myself it was probably the cleaning crew. They came through on Wednesdays sometimes. That was the story I told myself, because it was easier than the alternative. I pushed the door open and turned on the light. Empty office. Desk, chair, filing cabinet, nothing out of place. I checked the closet. Empty. I checked behind the desk. Nothing. I told myself I was being paranoid. Wrote it in the log as door found ajar, area checked, no issues, and moved on with my round. I want you to understand something about that building. It had cameras, but half of them were decorative, cost-cutting from the previous owner. The real ones only covered the lobby, the parking garage entrance, and the loading dock. Everything else, floors 2 through 4, was just me and a flashlight. I didn't think about that until later. That night, I just finished my round and went back to the desk. Around 1 in the morning, the phone at the front desk rang. Nobody called that line at night. It wasn't even supposed to be active after hours. The company just never bothered to shut it off. I picked it up, said the building's name like I was supposed to, and there was nothing on the other end. Not silence exactly. There was breathing. Slow and a little uneven, like someone catching their breath after climbing stairs. I said hello twice. Nobody answered. Then the line clicked and went dead. I sat there for a good 5 minutes just staring at that phone, trying to convince myself it was a wrong number, some kid messing around, anything but what my gut was telling me. I checked the caller ID. It said internal floor 3. There was no phone extension active on floor 3. I'd been told that during training. That whole floor had been stripped of most of its equipment when the last tenant moved out 2 years earlier. I remember standing up from that desk chair slower than I've ever stood up in my life. Every instinct in me said to just call my supervisor, tell him something felt wrong, and sit tight until morning. But I also knew if I called and there was nothing there, I'd look like an idiot, and this job didn't exactly have people lining up to replace me if I got a reputation for panicking. So I got my flashlight, and I went up to the 3rd floor. The elevator was slow, and I hated every second of that ride, watching the little number light up 2, then 3. When the doors opened, I walked toward where I remembered the old phone closet being. The door was open. Inside, there was an ancient desk phone sitting on a shelf, the cord running down into a wall jack that, according to my training, hadn't been active in years. The receiver was off the hook. I stood in that doorway for a long moment, staring at it, trying to come up with any explanation that made sense. Wiring fault, old equipment glitching, anything. I picked up the receiver, put it back on the base, and that's when I heard it. A door closing, not slamming, just closing gently somewhere down the hallway behind me. I spun around and my flashlight beam swept across empty office doors, all shut, exactly the way they were supposed to be during my last round. I stood absolutely still, listening, and for maybe 30 seconds there was nothing, just my own breathing, and the hum of the building's old HVAC system kicking on somewhere above me. Then, from one of the offices near the end of the hall, I heard someone clear their throat. I want to be honest with you. In that moment, I didn't think about my training or my log book or my paycheck. I thought about the fastest route to the stairwell and I took it. I didn't run exactly, but I moved faster than I have any right to admit, down 4 flights of stairs, through the lobby, straight to my car in the parking lot, and I sat there with the doors locked for almost 20 minutes before I could make myself call my supervisor. He told me it was probably a homeless person who'd gotten into the building through the parking garage, that it had happened once or twice before at other properties he managed, and that maintenance would do a full sweep in the morning. Maybe that's exactly what it was. A person who found a way in, hiding on an empty floor, using an old phone line out of boredom or curiosity or who knows what else. I want to believe that. It's the kind of explanation that lets me sleep at night. But here's the thing that maintenance found the next morning, going through that same office on the 3rd floor, the one near the end of the hallway. On the inside of the door, someone had written something in what looked like dry erase marker, small enough that you wouldn't see it unless you were standing right up against it. It said, "I know your rounds." I quit 2 days later. I never went back to collect my final paycheck. And to this day, if I'm ever in a building alone at night, I check every door twice, and I never, ever pick up a phone that shouldn't be ringing. If you made it this far, subscribe to Mr. Terrifying, and press the bell so you never miss next horror stories. Drop a like if any of these got under your skin, and let us know in the comments which one hit hardest. Stay safe out there. We'll see you in the next one.